Bruce, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. And just to kickstart, give us a quick rundown as to who and what the BLD Group is.
Okay, well, the BLD Group is a company that was formed in 1995. We specialize in sponsorship management, sports in particular, but we can work in other areas. We also do some athletic management. We do eventing. We do entertainment. And basically media and public relations. So that's really what we do, and we specialize in sport. I won't lie in that regard, but we have dabbled in a lot of entertainment recently, and entertainment around sport, as well as corporate sponsorship management, which has become quite an important part of the South African landscape.
Bruce, obviously our relationship goes back quite a while, but specifically in the netball, tennis, and athletics fields here in South Africa. You're still very much a part of all three of those sports codes here in South Africa, and obviously you have sort of very broad tentacles into the global game when it comes to those three sports. Very briefly, what is the status of those three sports globally now coming out of this pandemic?
Well, I think all three sports is very different. Let's start with athletics, which is obviously not that affected because the athletes are all individual athletes. And most of them, unfortunately, during lockdown, couldn't train like they would have liked to have trained. Yvette van Zyl, for instance, was running around her garden crazy to do like 10 or 15 kilometers a day. I'm sure she's got trenches, not pathways around her garden. But I mean, you know, the athletes could get onto the street between 6 and 9 o'clock when that embargo came into our country. And now obviously 6 to 6 in the evening or to 8 o'clock in the evening. So yeah, I don't think the athletes are that affected when it comes to training, but when it came to events, it became more problematic. And that's where these athletes really need to get back. It's all very well having the virtual races. We saw a very successful Comrades virtual race being run this past weekend, but it's just not the same. These guys need to get back. When it comes to netball, we, funny enough, just recently had Spar Proteas head coach Dorette Badenhorst on the line. She says that the COVID-19 has horribly affected her preparations, not only for her Spar Proteas going forward this year, but for World Cup 2023, which is going to be in Cape Town. Netball players have been feeling the pinch all around the world. We've seen a lot of virtual training, et cetera, et cetera. The first netball countries to open up are going to be Australia and New Zealand. They're almost about to start playing their super leagues there. Luckily, we have some of our players over there participating, like Carla Pretorius, Lenise Potgieter. So that's going to be a benefit for our Spar Proteas, because at least some of our players, our cream de crop players, are going to be playing international competition at the highest level as early as in the next 2-3 weeks. So that's a blessing. But for our local netball, it's difficult. We were one of the sports that was allowed by the minister to start resumption. So now what happens is all the players in the respective teams have to go into isolation for a couple of weeks, which is another delay. Once they've been cleared of being COVID-free, they go into a training routine, which is also limited in special facilities, but at least they can start training. And that's the big thing, because the big priority for Netball South Africa is to get the league on the go, the Telkom Premier League. We have to get our players out there playing at the highest possible level. I don't think the Spar National Netball Championships, which is a premier event, will take place in August. They'll have to move that till end of the year. So yeah, netball is looking much more positive than any other sport, and tennis is also lifted, but a lot of different thoughts and processes. Only this weekend, Tennis South Africa had to send a document to the minister, because there's a lot of clarity that's got to be made. Professionals can play we only have a handful of professionals. Then they say league players can play. Players that are preparing for the national championships can play, but not recreational players.
Yeah.
So this is going to cause a lot of concern, because a recreational player all of a sudden will put his hand up and say, I'm training for league. So we're going to see a lot of players using the loopholes. And this could have a lot of effect on facilities, because there's supposed to be a maintenance of facilities. We must remember that if you are a player preparing for a national championships, we have 2,000 players, junior players, that can play national championships, but they play at 200 different venues across the country. So,
wow.
You know, there's going to be a lot of different elements in tennis, but they are absolutely over the moon locally that they can start preparing to go onto court. Coaches are bleeding because coaches need income. They can only coach their top end players, which are preparing for nationals or leagues or whatever, and most of their coaching base comes from recreational players. So that's a bit of a problem for the coaches. Internationally, it's very, very messy. I won't lie, Mark. The ATP Tour recently had a call. It's not looking good. We don't know when they're going to return. The players, some of the players are saying that it's unfair to return when they've been in isolation and not been able to hit a ball, where some countries' players have been able to hit a ball, so that's unfair advantage. The US Open it's just such a talking point at the moment. I really don't know what's going to happen, because players don't want to play, some do want to play, some are fighting each other at when they should return to play. It's problematic, and I don't know what is going to happen from a global spectrum to tennis, because there are plans to resume play in July. That could be possible, but it also is going to have a lot of problems in some areas. We're seeing a spike in Brazil. We're seeing a spike in a few other countries. Our country, for instance, is going to still go into the spike period. And we've seen a second wave coming through in China.
So, Bruce, yeah, I think it's safe to say that global sport is in a quandary right now. Specifically, tennis, netball, and athletics. I see the ITF just recently announced, what is it, a $2.6 million relief fund. I've seen nothing in the athletics space. I've seen nothing in the netball space. Is there something like that coming from the other federations just to assist the national associations and everything, associated with these global sports?
I know that the IAAF are holding meetings at the moment, talking about a relief fund of some sort, but originally they had put out a statement saying that they were relying on all their member nations to look after their own athletes. And I know that the government in South Africa have a relief program, and I know that the athletes, the professional athletes that do run or track or field for a living, were able to apply to that fund. I just know that with athletics more than with tennis, although there was an application put forward for tennis players as well, the prize monies are incredibly different. What a tennis player earns compared to what an athlete earns, it's incomparable. So, you know, it was quite difficult for the IAAF to maybe meet any of the obligations, like tennis players have luckily got very rich bodies. I'm talking incredibly rich bodies, like the ATP and the WTA Tour and the ITF. So there was monies, and in fact, the monies that I saw made available by the ITF and the ATP and the WTA Tour, I don't even think that's enough money to really do any justice for the players and what they need. I think it was a nice start, but I do think that, you know, much more money could have been put into the kitty. However, saying that, without any tournaments being played, we must remember that the incomes coming into those federations, global federations, are lesser. We know that a Wimbledon makes a £300 million profit a year. It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And a lot of that money is put into development of the sport in England. So without Wimbledon being played this year, there's going to be a huge shortfall of cash injection into development programs in Great Britain. So we've got to also bear that in mind.
Absolutely. And obviously, with it also being an Olympic year, the Olympics now we know have been moved out. There's also now be some modifications with regards to qualification for the Olympics. And here specifically, we're talking most notably for athletics.
Yeah, all of this is a very, very important to note. And I'm glad you brought that question in, because I don't think that the world realizes what this pandemic, if we want to call it pandemic, has had on professional athletes and their careers and their training programs. I mean, it has been immensely frustrating for, and I can speak more about tennis players because I'm in touch with a lot of the top players. But you take the world #1 doubles team of Cabal and Farrar from Colombia. They have not hit a ball. I'm talking not hit a ball for 2 months. Colombia haven't allowed them onto a tennis court alone, even if they had a court at home to hit a ball. So fitness-wise, they're there. They are superbly fit. They've been training, but they have not hit a ball for 2 months. Now, I can tell you now, it's going to take them 2 or 3 weeks to even get into any sort of groove before they can even play tournaments. So, this is a very important thing. And I think with athletes as well, we spoke about the training. The training is great, but it's when it comes to competition, you've got to compete regularly at a top level in order to maintain your status as a top sportsman. That's the bottom line. There is a big difference to going on a court and hitting balls as a practice than actually going to play a match. Match sharpness is a major, major problem. And that's what came up in my recent virtual calls with the ATP and the WTA tour with their players. They are talking about being ready to be able to compete like they always used to, and how unfair it is for some nations to have obviously lifted lockdown. Their players can go out and do what they want where others can't. And they can't just relocate to another country. I mean, Lloyd Harris has been sitting in Cape Town in a townhouse setup with a little virtual gym, basically on his patio. But that's it. He has not been able to hit any balls. It's been amazing. He's done as much as he can, mental toughness. He's gone through all videos of his previous matches with his coach on a virtual call, just trying to go through matches, trying to sharpen up on those things. But he just hasn't been out there hitting balls. And it's going to take a while. There's some players that need time to get back into that groove. And this is a big problem for a lot of, and even the netball players. The netball players, Bongi Masomi, Smart Proteas captain, is out there in her townhouse garden, running, catching balls, whatever. But she's just not on the netball court. It's going to be a complete different ball game. And what's even worse, Mark, is that when they go back, there are going to be so many regulations and rules.
Yeah.
It's going to be very, very different to what it's normally like. And those that can adapt are going to achieve better.
I wanted to talk about that because, I saw the return to play protocols for football, how they were rolled out in the Bundesliga, how they were rolled out in the K-League in Korea. We'll obviously see how that gets rolled out into the English Premier League. We've seen La Liga go live. We'll see the Serie A go live. And obviously, gradually, all sports will roll out. The impact of all of these particular additional regulations coming into the sport, is that going to now require an additional sort of level of mental fortitude from the athletes? Or is it just going to become one of those things where either you have it and you're able to adapt, or you are going to just be one of those casualties and not be able to compete like you used to compete?
I don't think that it's going to affect netball that much, to be honest. Although we have some professional netball players, and there's a handful of them in England and Australia and New Zealand, and we've got a few South Africans that play in the leagues. It's not going to affect them that much. I also don't think it's going to affect the athletics. I think what's going to affect netball and athletics more is how the stadiums are prepared.
Yeah.
And how many people go and watch. We know that netball is a hugely popular sport in some of the big countries around the world, in fact, in South Africa, and how much the crowd play a role in the team's performance. Okay, yeah. So I think that's going to be more of a problem than it is to the individual athletes. I think they're going to adapt quite easily. Tennis is a nightmare. I'll tell you a story. A new tournament director, Stacey Alistair's appointed as the new tournament director of the US Open. She is adamant that the US Open must continue in September on the dates that originally were. Yeah. The plan is to stay in New York. Originally, they were going to go and they were going to play it in Indian Wells in the desert because it's lesser problematic there, the virus, that it is in New York. But New York is the city and New York refused to give it up. So fine. They'll take the Arthur Ashe Tennis Center and the Billie Jean King National Tennis Center where the US Open's played. That is a hospital at the moment. Can you believe it?
Yes.
They're going to have to obviously get rid of the hospital and they're going to have to bring back the tennis players. Now, the tennis players have said that they need to have a tournament before the US Open. So Cincinnati Masters, which is a major tournament, men and women, owned by the USTA, is going to be played beforehand at the same venue. So Cincinnati won't host it. It'll be in New York. So that's number one. So the players got that. The problem is they all have to stay at one hotel. It's never been done before. The players are given a per diem. They're allowed to stay wherever they want, anywhere in New York. They can hire apartment, Airbnb, go into a hotel. Now they've all got to stay in one hotel. That is a condition so that they can control the participants in one hotel. They've got a hotel, no problem. The problem is the hotel can only accommodate so many people. So all of a sudden, instead of each player having 6 entourage, they're only allowed to have 3. So all of a sudden, Djokovic can't bring his fitness trainer and his physio because he needs his hitting partner and his coach. So Djokovic says, I'm not playing the US Open. The conditions are too tight for me. I can't do that. And 7 players agreed with him. So all of a sudden, you've got a US Open that has got a field of players that really don't, in my opinion, deserve to possibly make up this US so-called Open, because now you've got your top players all pulling out because their entourages can't go and they're not used to the strict protocol. It's all right for the number 20 in the world to go because he only went with his coach and his wife or his, whatever. Yeah. But entourages can't go. So that's a problem, number one. Number two, they can't have a qualifying anymore for the US Open because they can't accommodate the players. So now all of a sudden you've got hopefuls that normally would try and get in, like Lloyd Harris made his break in his career by qualifying for the US Open.
Yes.
A few years ago. Now he's not able to qualify if he was a qualifier. So you're actually doing more detriment to the development of the professional game than any good. Second, and the last point is that these tournaments that the ATP and the WTA are introducing will have no points. It's just about prize money.
Wow, why no points?
Because they can't allocate points because not all the players are going to be available to want to play. And also you are cutting off your qualifying element that are needing the points. So your top end players are now getting higher ranked where your others are falling off the bandwagon. So it's kind of unfair.
Yeah.
And so they've decided that it's going to be money only tournaments, and it is big money. I mean, the US Open prize money is $50 million or whatever it is. It's huge money. I mean, the winner takes away a big purse. I mean, some people don't earn that in their whole career. But the problem is the money is is not going to convince the player. The safety is a big issue for a lot of the players, and also this inconvenience of having to travel from Europe to New York, which is a really bad coronavirus hotspot. You know, take out of Europe, that is basically coming out of coronavirus now.
Yeah.
It's becoming a big risk and a big problem. And I could hear Djokovic, Nadal, hey, they're not going to play a US Open in those conditions. So,
and can I ask the other question?
Yeah.
With regards to fans, I mean, have they decided if there's going to be, is it going to be a fanless event?
Fanless, yeah, it has to be.
So obviously additional revenues go out the window. From a sponsorship point of view, there's limited opportunity to get the experiential component in play. It's purely going to be television and I presume OTT broadcasting.
Well, you know, Wimbledon made a call because they had to make a call. The grass court season is limited. They can't just have their tournament whenever they want to have their tournament, because you have to play a number of grass court tournaments before Wimbledon in order to get the best of the player on grass.
Yeah.
You understand? So it just didn't make sense to have Wimbledon, right? And also the summer, it has to be played in summer because the grass is only green in summer. That type, it was a whole process. So they made a call that regretfully had to be made.
Yeah.
The French Open are absolutely adamant that they're going to have the French Open, and they want the French Open in the proper and right format. Points, everything.
Wow.
And the players are all for the French Open taking place later on in the year. They've already pushed it out, and they said they'll even push the tournament out a little later if it needs be. And it's looking good for the French Open. The US Open, it's all about business. This whole thing is about business. And on the call with the players, there was a question asked by a couple of the players. What is more important here? We're hearing the USTA. Is this because they need money? How important is the safety of the players with what they're trying to do? Because the USTA know that they can't push their tournament out much further than when they are due to play. That's the problem, because the French Open had already, before they have made any call, they had already moved their tournament. So they have to now fit in with the French Open dates. And the French Open said, we don't mind actually moving a little later. But the players are saying, hang on, we'd rather just play in the French Open, forget about the US Open. It's going to have points, it's going to have prize money, it's going to be normal. So they said to the WTA Tour and the ATP, why don't you develop some really cool and bring back some of the big clay court tournaments around the French Open, and let's form a little clay court circuit over a 6-week period.
Yeah.
And Rome and Madrid and Barcelona might, you know, they might be able to just play like they normally did later on in the year, because the clay is the clay. There's no need. So the US Open is in a bit of a quandary, but I'm sensing and I'm smelling a rat, in the sense that it could be a lot of business decisions are being made by the USTA because of the amount of money it generates, television audiences, and everything. So they are very worried, and I wouldn't like to be the new tournament director there, because after that call with the players, which went into 4 hours, it didn't look very positive for the US Open. For the players that are ranked between 30 and 100 in the world, they'll go for the money. They haven't been making any money. They'll go for the money. But is a US Open with only 2 of your top 12 players in the singles? And you're only 2 of the, you know what I mean? It becomes a problem, because it's, and no points. It just becomes, can you rightfully put the 2020 winner on the cup with everybody else? Correct.
That for me is probably the biggest question, because and no disrespect to Lloyd Harris, but let's use Lloyd as the example. Lloyd ultimately becomes the US Open winner. is
Yeah.
he rightfully in the same league as the previous 10, 15, 20 years winners of the US Open? And logically, we have to say, no, he's not.
Yeah, it's a major challenge. And I think that, you know, one of the players, I can't remember who it was, I think it was Diego Schwartzman, he actually said, let's have the tournament, but let's not call it the US Open. Let's call it the US Masters. So it's actually not the US Open, the official Grand Slam. The US Open for 2020 has been shelved and it will continue next year, and there will be a blank name next to 2020, like Wimbledon. The Australian Open took place. We all know that. You know, the French Open is definitely going to take place the way they're talking. But, and just, you know, carry on having your tournament, make your money, because, you know, like I said, it's obviously very important for you to make money, but just have a US Masters and let's not have the US Open. And then, you know, let the players come in. So it's becoming quite a topic point. And in fact, the press release due to go out today has been delayed by 2 weeks because of this.
2-week delay.
Yeah, because they need to now consult after the
I suppose a big component, like you say, all business decisions being made in the background, is if you change it from the US Open, what's going to happen with sponsorships and sponsorship rights? I suppose there are sponsorship deals that have been done years and years ago, going forward a couple of years. So I suppose it all has an impact on that. Bruce, we could probably talk about tennis, and maybe we should have a dedicated tennis conversation with you in the coming days. But I just want to sort of diversify this a little bit more.
Sure.
You mentioned earlier netball. I had a conversation with Cecilia Molokwane a couple of weeks ago, just with regards to the state of netball in South Africa, the preparations towards World Cups, all building up to 2023. You mentioned, having spoken to one of the national coaches, that all of her preparations have been thrown a curveball. How bad? I mean, let's talk Turkey here. How bad has this lockdown in South Africa been in terms of preparations for World Cup 2023?
Well, it certainly has delayed matters, and I think any delay is not good. I mean, we know that a delay can really put a lot of pressure onto any preparation. So I think that going forward, Netball South Africa and the International Netball Federation are going to have to certainly act very smartly in order to play catch up and in order to get on track. I think they about 7 or 8 months behind in preparations, which is a long time in any eventing calendar. They have not yet appointed the tournament director per se. They haven't formed the LOC per se. All of that was supposed to have been done in January. So without an LOC, you can't start actually marketing or promoting the event. And the problem is, with so many pressures on big corporate South Africa because of COVID, the economy's in a mess. Sponsorship negotiations now are going to be very difficult to do, because nobody actually couldn't forecast where they're going to be in maybe a year or two's time, because we don't even know when this virus is going to end in our country. So I think, yes, there is definitely a problem in preparation. And I think the quicker they can appoint the head of events or tournament director, and the quicker they can appoint an LOC, then maybe they can get going with volunteer appointments, programs like that, and start working on those smaller details that can be ticked off, so that the other issues can be focused on when need to be. That's why I'm saying they might have to start thinking very carefully how they do this. Television rights can be negotiated, obviously, and all those type of things can be done now. Get that all out the way, so when you're able to run, you can run fast. But there's definitely been a delay in the preparations, and I think that has been a negative towards 2023, unfortunately. But Mark, the world's in our shoes. I mean, if you talk about netball players around the world, they've all been in the same predicament. They've all been in the same shoes. All the federations have been in the same shoes. So when we all go back onto court and we can play, we all are basically where we were. It's just, you know, there's very, nobody's going to be one step ahead. The only countries that are going to kind of be a step ahead are going to be New Zealand and Australia, because New Zealand, as we know, is absolutely clear of coronavirus. So they operating. We've already seen with the rugby. The netball players are going to be out there. So they're going to have that step ahead. And unfortunately, they are the world number 1 and 2. So they really don't need to be any step ahead of anybody because we're the ones that need to be a step ahead. And there's a lot of frustration. Jamaica are very frustrated. England are very frustrated. Direct Bardenus was telling us that she's been talking to all the nations, and it hasn't been easy. And New Zealand and Australia really are very lucky. And it's because of their low populations. We know that they're able to do much more than the other countries can do. And also they've got the financial resources, because if 78% of your population are taxpayers, I mean, you're definitely going to be able to do far more than you can do anywhere else in the world.
Yeah. Bruce, just looking at some of sort of the macroeconomic things, or let's call it macro political things that are taking place on, let's call it a socioeconomic level. We see the whole BLM movement growing in leaps and bounds across the globe. I don't want to get your thoughts on that, but I know a topic that we've spoken about in the past. Can something like Black Lives Matter actually make a difference when we look back at particularly the 3 sports we're looking at, netball, athletics, and tennis, and across the board, prize money between the men's sport and the women's sports are fundamentally different?
Yeah, the prize monies, funny enough, in tennis aren't that fundamentally different.
Anymore. They used to be.
Anymore, yeah, they used to be. So, you know, what Serena wins at the US Open for the women's singles title is the same as Novak wins. So, and if you go down from first round, whatever, so it has been. But definitely what I think has happened, Mark, and I'll tell you what, this really, really is interesting. Jeff Kutsia hosted a Teams, whatever you want to call it, Zoom call with Billie Jean King last week. What? I don't know if you were on that call.
No.
Incredible. You got to get the copy. And it's such a good thing to play, because Billie Jean King was speaking exactly about this question. How it has taken her so long for women's rights to be brought to a forefront, for LGBT rights to be brought to a forefront. And now this is happening. She lives in New York. She was telling us how proud she was of the protesters going out there and actually for the first time doing something impactful. She says, we've seen a lot of protests, but globally she feels that the protests by the BLM movement, all right, or around the BLM movement have been very impactful. And there have been incredible videos by big sponsors where athletes that they sponsor that are Black have thrown down rackets and have been involved in huge campaigns. And all of a sudden, you know, these matters matter now. Yeah. That's what she was saying. You know, people are now aware. We've got ignorant population people that always were never ever too concerned about, you know, this type of violence by police or by anybody. And now all of a sudden it's right in your face. It's in the news. It's on every channel. And now people are starting to really think lives of other people other than yourselves do matter. And whether you are gay, straight, religious of any sort, all of these lives do matter. And she was just saying how important this movement has been for not only society, but particularly for sport, because she thinks that people will see hosting different types of cultural people at their events who play at the highest of levels,
Yeah.
it will all be, that there will be a more level playing field, in her opinion, because she thinks that a person like Serena Williams, a person like James Blake, like Sloane Stephens, Coco, all those players will be actually given a more equal and better platform by those that might have in their minds thought that they actually weren't fitting in to the crowd. And it's sad to say that, but there were people out there that saw this handful of non-white tennis players that were making a big break in the game as kind of different. It's just sad.
And just off the back of that, I see that there was a call just not so long ago, a day or two ago, that what is it, for the Olympic Charter to abolish Rule 50. And for the viewers out there that don't know what Rule 50 is, according to the Olympic Charter, it designates the protection of neutrality of sport, whereas no kind of demonstration, political, religious, or racial propaganda is permitted in any Olympic sites, venue, or areas. Now, I mean, surely this whole equality thing, because let's be honest, the whole BLM movement has really, really highlighted inequality across the board. It's brought it to the fore. Would we possibly see the Olympic movement abolishing Rule 50, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I've debated this. I think bodies like the Olympic Committee are worried, because we must always remember, never underestimate the power of the people. Too many people underestimate the power of the people. I mean, we know in our land that if the people really wanted a change, they could make a change. We know that. The power is in the people's hands. And I think that this is a big worry to a lot of bodies like the Olympic Committee. And I think that, whether this is going to change that rule, I don't know. But I do know that a lot of bodies around the world are re-looking at constitutions because of what's happened in Minneapolis. Definitely. They are re-looking at a lot of policies that could possibly spark off any protest like this, which we don't want. And and it is for me a very big concern that the Trump administration, I don't think they actually grasp what this is all about. And maybe there is an element in the United States that supports Trump. Definitely it is, because he wouldn't be the president. And I think, he's treading on a very fine line there, because whatever he says and whatever he does might backfire on him when it comes to election day in November.
Correct.
So I think that the sadness, and this is what Billie Jean King was also saying, and she wasn't saying whether she was Democrat or she was Republican or whatever. She was just saying that the sadness is that, there are a lot of people, we've realized, in the world that need education. And she's hoping that demonstration does educate these people that are actually preventing our society from being normal and equal.
Very, very sad state of affairs, definitely, but hopefully we're seeing a big change globally. Bruce, as always, it's been fantastic, fascinating. I don't know what else I could say chatting to you. You seem to have your ear everywhere when it comes to the likes of tennis, netball, and athletics. Truly appreciate the opportunity. We're definitely going to make sure it's not the last one for a long time. Definitely going to catch up with you a little bit more often. And hopefully get to see you in person when lockdown here in South Africa comes to an end.
It will be a pleasure. And it is a pleasure talking to you, Mark, because I tell you, for those viewers out there and listeners, I mean, the questions are very relevant. I love always talking to people that actually do a little bit of homework and know their stuff before throwing it at you, because sometimes you've got to actually be a circus master because you've got clowns talking to you and they just don't know enough about their subject. So kudos to you. It's been a pleasure. And whenever we want, and I think, there's some great discussions on each of the sports individually.
Yes.
That are interesting to the listeners and the viewers, because tennis is going through a really big transition at the moment, so that's a discussion point on its own. Netball World Cup, as we spoke about the delays in 2023 and where we're going, and also a very interesting thing is, how do these netball ranking work? How can Spa Proteas be so brilliant in the last 4 years but still stay at number 5 in the world, 23 points behind the last one? Everybody else seems to move except us. These are all discussion points that I think are interesting. And athletics, I don't know. All of a sudden, virtual races are in thing. I mean, I don't know. I just can't believe it. It's is this the future? I don't know, because this is quite incredible. 45,000 people who all can say that they did a comrades in their life, whether it was 5 kilometers or it was 95 kilometers. They did the comrades.
Yeah, for me, unfortunately, it sounds very much like the US Open discussion we have. Did I truly finish the comrades? Because running 5Ks is not exactly a 90-kilometer ultra marathon.
I promise you now, 42,000 of the 45 are going to say to their grandchildren, we did the comrades.
Yes, I know.
I know. Lovely talking to you, Mark. Thank you so much.
We're definitely going to set up those individual conversations. Thanks again for your time. Love it, and
Pleasure.
chat soon.
Take care and be safe. Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.